If you've experienced something that has changed your life, you want to be able to tell people about that. You want to be able to share that information. And sometimes it's difficult to do because it's some otherworldly experience that you've had. But when that gives you a direction and you then, you just, like, it's not something I can go, well, you know, here is what I did. You know, I did this, and then that was what I observed, and then that's the analysis of that. I can't write it down as an equation, but I can tell you through my experiences. This is what I've had. This is what I've been through, and this is how I was able to see the forest through the trees. Mm-hmm. So science being one aspect that they seem to kind of base a lot of their understanding on, because when you're talking about the infinite, you can't make a definition of it. Like that, we're trying to get to a point where we agree on a definition of something, and that's why the argument between, or the debate between, atheism and spiritualism, or some religion, whatever specific, you know, doctrine it is just incredible to see unfold, because both sides are trying to find where they meet.
Yeah.
Even if it is just kind of linguistic.
But what's also very interesting is what drives the atheist to get to the bottom of these things. That's a more fundamental question. Well, I want to know. Where does that come from, that urge to wanting to know? Mm. Because there's an element within the atheist that is a seeker that comes and speaks and sits down with JP and, you know, tries to convince him that there is no God. Why are you doing that? You know, what's your urge behind that? So there's an element there that I still can't fully
the
grasp.
The want to know
Yeah.
who they are, and to do that through understanding someone else's point of view. Is that not love?
At least it's a pursuit for truth, right?
Is truth not love?
Like, now you're getting to the heavy hitters, bro.
Well,
I mean, when you get to those realms of God and you try to put them in words, it seems like truth and love are the things that seem to persevere when you strip everything out of it or off it. When you speak to your atheist friends, do you have a feeling that some of the willingness to only believe what you see comes from your desire to keep being in control?
Absolutely.
If you have a problem giving up control, you can ask, why is it that people want to have control? They want to have control in order to reduce uncertainty. Why would you want to reduce uncertainty, evolutionarily speaking? And we can speak about that evolutionarily because the atheist is obsessed with evolution, right? Mm. You want to reduce uncertainty because evolutionarily speaking, it symbolizes an exclusion from the genetic pool unless you face the uncertainty and are able to overcome it. So to a certain extent, then you could say that the ego is tied into this entire system of not willing to give up control. You will always have, and with these conversations specifically, I find them very draining because one is purely using their mind to make a case against God, and the other one is trying to use their mind, because he has to speak and rationalize, to make a case for God, which actually within him is a feeling, is an intuition. So there is a mismatch on the discussion front to begin with. Mm-hmm. There is only so much you can do verbally and intellectually to get to God. Mm-hmm. And so I don't believe you can convince any of those guys to believe in God through rational arguments. Mm-hmm. You can replace this one word for the other. You can structure the sentence like that. You can push them in this corner if you're intellectually able to. But ultimately, believing in God, that's a deeply rooted feeling of faith and trust and love. And also humility. I think in order for you to be willing to give up that level of control, you have to be brave, first of all, because it puts you in a state of not knowing. And you have to be humble enough to say, I just don't know. And what's also funny, and I think then we can move on from this point, the last point I want to make, when I see these discussions of atheists versus religious people, and then there was another video also by the same channel, you can actually look that up. It was Alex O'Connor, one atheist versus 20 Christians. Okay. The other way around. The whole vibe of the religious people, the 20 religious people, in comparison to the 20 atheist people, was way more relaxed. And then I was thinking about that. Okay. Why is that?
Interesting.
Well, if you're someone that is able to say, I don't know, but I have faith. I can't explain it, but I just know that God exists.
A calmness.
That's a calmness. And that calmness comes from humility and saying, I'm limited, man. Putting my hands up there. So did JP, by the way, towards the end yesterday when I was watching this argument. I was like, you're asking me questions I just don't know. So that gets to the bottom of it, which is believing in God is not the mind, man. I cannot say A plus B equals C and therefore I believe in God. It's way beyond that. So when I look at these discussions, I find them entertaining, but also draining at the same time. Mm-hmm. The bigger question is, I think that we can pose here. Forget about what he said, what they said, and who's right, who's wrong. Why are we doing that? Why are we sitting there and trying to figure that question out, man?
But I guess because no matter how this is going to bring us to loss, no matter how much we say that we're not, at some degree within us, we are fearful of the end. Mm-hmm. The end being death, and or the death of everyone that we know and we love.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to understand our position inside of all of the chaos of the universe. A sense of belonging. So no matter how much you say that you're not fearful of, at some point not being a part of this, what we have right now, you know that it's not permanent. You know that it's not going to last forever. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of ways that you could approach that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that, dude. That opens up a whole new discussion of, it seems to me like everything that both the religious and the atheists are trying to do is to regulate themselves emotionally. In a state of not being able to make sense of anything and not having a feeling of knowing anything, you're living in a state of chaos and disease, which ultimately, I think, is a result of a lot of these diseases, is, living in a place of despair, anger, sadness, not being able to make sense of anything. So ultimately, both the atheist and the religious person, I think they're trying to find peace. One of them is trying to find peace by saying that we're temporary beings, we're a result of evolution, we will go, and that's it. We're a result of atoms coming together and then something happened and we're here and we'll go. That gives me peace. The other one is like, that just doesn't make sense, man. There's something beyond that. There is the ultimate creator. There is God. There is the quantum. There is that force. There is the infinite. There is the divine. That gives me peace too. So I think everyone is finding a framework in order to regulate themselves emotionally, and also when life hits in unexpected ways, to be able to persevere. Mm. And what's interesting for me is that we all seek for that framework, that seeking nature in itself that essentially all of us have, man. And the fact that we're trying to make sense, that to me is more interesting than why is religion correct? Why is, Buddhism correct? Why is atheism correct? There is different ways to regulate yourself emotionally. That's why I think my definition of God is always that, is whatever framework or action or practice or habit or thought or cluster of thoughts bring you peace amidst turbulence around you, that to me is your God. That's your fundamental guiding principle. And if you don't have anything that does that, you're in trouble, because you're going to be enslaved to your feelings being dictated by the things that happen around you all the time. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to regulate yourself emotionally. And that's why I believe you can be religious without identifying as being a religious person. You're just being it because your trust, your love, your faith, your gratitude allows you to find peace. And the other way around. You can say you're religious, you can go to church, but you're not able to find peace and you're not able to find emotional regulation. Then you're being religious by the word, not by the heart. And God has a very specific statement about that. He says a lot of them, they come to me and they worship me by the mouth, but their hearts are so far removed from me. And that is because they're using means to get to know me that are taught to them by men. Speech, logic, rationality. What is not taught by men? Intuition, heart, and feeling.
Makes me think of overanalyzing things again, like just to go by the feeling of something, because ultimately we are all seeking to be able to be the most at peace with our thoughts, at peace with our current position, current place in life. We're all making judgments on external happenings, but, and I preach this, it's not necessarily as easy to put into practice because I'm a slave to my own thoughts most of the time. But what I'm learning to do is corral them and actually sit with things for a second and then just be like you sent me this picture with the, hold that question. What was it? Hold the question.
The intuition thing?
Yeah. Just for like, I can't even remember without looking at it.
Yeah.
But basically, due to the experiences that people have, they make up their mind on what's about to come in front of them, or what they experience around them. But what we're really all seeking in the seekingness of searching for our understanding of where and how we belong is to get to the place of most calm, most flow, most chillaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Always. To be at comfort with where we're already at, and to know with faith that where we're going is better than, doesn't even have to be better than, but I guess, yeah, why not? Why not move with that mentality that if you get your ducks in a line, that where you are moving to can be infinitely better than where you are at, versus the opposite of that. Oh, everything's entropy and it's disintegrating into chaos. Yeah, your body might be, like, in terms of at some point you're going to pass. But why not live from the place that everything inside you is the opposite of entropy? Because it's all perspective, right? If your consciousness and your focus is switched on to the things that you can achieve by virtue of how you live your life and the moral framework and et cetera, then can you not live the absolute most purest of ripping?
I subscribe to your framework, man. That's why we get along so
That's why
well.
we're drinking like ocean water.
Yes, pure ocean water. I think the atheist type will say, because I can't see it, because I can't observe it, because I believe in evolution.
That's so limiting, though, because they also know that they're limited to their senses. Like, they know that they can't see past a certain spectrum of colours. How would they stake their claim on all of that?
You have to ask an atheist, man. I mean, I think it comes back to your inability, or your, I should say your unwillingness to let go of control, and your ability to admit that there might be something so far beyond what you could possibly fathom that it would wipe out your entire view on reality. Because that would change everything so fundamentally if there is a God, if there is something that is an intelligence we can possibly grasp with our brain and experience with our five senses. It would shake the foundation that the atheist is standing on, right? So I understand the fact that they're holding on to the theory of evolution and the fact that, certain values just evolved because they increased our chances of survival. But I think believing in God is ultimately the bravest, not only the best thing, but also the bravest and most courageous thing you can do. Because you are admitting that your eyes can only see that much. But through faith, you just know that there is a reality far beyond that. And I think it goes back to the question of knowing. The atheist wants to know everything through the mind. Everything needs to make sense and needs to be observed. The Christian or the religious person knows from the heart. Those are two different types of knowing. And that's why you can never bring those together. Even in the best conversation possible, you can exchange ideas, and they're interesting. But you can never reconcile knowing from the heart as a feeling that there just is through trust, faith, and love, and knowing from the mind, asking, where's the evidence? I can't give you the evidence.
Yeah, it's just how you see it. This again is reminding me of the white and the gold dress and the black and the blue dress. Like, you're just seeing two different visions. Visually, I'm seeing it this way, and you're arguing it. You're never gonna. It's not like one person is gonna convince the other one. It's more to see if they can again find something that they agree on. Can we just agree that it's a dress?
And I do think what a lot of them find is that they're actually living very similar values. Even the atheist doesn't like to lie, doesn't like to steal, doesn't like to not love, it likes to be grateful, likes to help other people. The real question is, why do you like to do that, and why does it feel like it's the right thing? Why is your conscience telling you this is good and this is bad? Why do you feel guilty when you lie? Why do you feel guilty when you steal, right? And I think it reminds me of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which is exactly about that. And it makes the case for God and against the atheist, because he's finding in the story, he's essentially killing this very despicable landlord. It's an old lady that beats up her sister and makes her clean the place, and then just takes money from people, lies to people, is deceiving. She does everything bad that you can possibly think of. And Raskolnikov gets so angry at her that he kills her in that story. And he kills her with the rational justification that he's doing a net benefit to humanity. He says, if this person does not live anymore, it's a net benefit to humanity. You can see the resemblance with a lot of the people talking about politicians when it comes to these things too. The world will be a better place if person X wasn't here. So he does that, and the entire story is about him legally, rationally getting away with it. They can't find him. They can't find enough evidence. And he gets away with it. Doesn't have to go to jail. No one thinks that he did it. And the story plays out him getting so sick, being in the bed, shaking, developing a fever first, and then just getting mentally sick because his conscience is killing him. He's being tortured by his conscience more than any police officer or jail could. And so the story in a nutshell is about the fact that we can't make up our own value system. If we were able to make up our own value system, we could be doing those things such as killing, lying, and stealing and not feel guilty and bad about them. But the fact that we do tells us there's something inherent beyond the mind that justifies and negotiates itself out of it.
The guiding principle or something. You mentioned the dark triad before, which was interesting to me. And it made me think about, I've gone absolutely crazy before. And I don't mean that in a facetious way. I mean, I've actually kind of lost my mind and gone borderline insane. Like, couldn't understand who I was, disassociative. And in that, there was something that managed to bring me through it. Something that gave me hope for the next day. And that was a time where I wasn't as spiritual as I am now, but something carried me through it. I think that was maybe my experience of how dark something can go, and how there can be some light at the end of the tunnel that brings you out of it.
What was it, if you could explain it in words, that carried you through the darkest, heaviest moments? What was it? Are you able to explain that in words?
There's a phrase that comes to mind, which is that God is the author of our story. I know that I am co-creating my reality through the way that I see things, but stories were playing out for me kind of in real time. I was having visions, experiencing them and making sense of them in my head. Across cultures, there's similarities in dreams, and we can't explain that.
Yeah.
There was this underlying understanding of what I was visually seeing in this kind of dream state, where I had gone absolutely, completely loopy, where intellectually I couldn't make sense of things. Rationally, I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't understand how I was in the situation that I was in. So I was making sense of the situation in a kind of story-like mentality. There was one point where a guy wearing a long robe walked past me. Robe, it was probably a dressing gown. But to me, in that moment, it was like, oh, Jesus. Now, obviously it isn't, but to me, it was enough in that moment to give me just what I needed to take me to the transition to the next step. So I'm making sense of things in my visions, in my experience of what was happening in my environment at that time, through biblical context, or at least through something which I don't know how to describe it, was kind of guiding me. It was like fundamental truths were being played out in front of me. I felt like almost I was an audience member at the theater, seeing, like watching. I wasn't me. Does any of this? It's so difficult to explain.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
explain it.
Yeah, I'm really trying to to give it, like, if you want to ask any more questions, by all means, I'm absolutely open book. To make sense of that, for it to be something that is valuable to you.
Yeah.
I can't.
When you had those images, for example, you saw that, that figure that represented Jesus, and you said you made sense of that. Was it actually making sense of it, or was it a feeling of just relief that came as a result of that experience?
I was holding on for dear life at that point. And I don't mean in terms of like I was about to kill myself. I mean, when you lose your mind, you're trying to do anything you can to hold on to your understanding. So if you ever had an experience on any kind of drug where you disassociate from who you are, there's a part of you which tries to hold on to that.
Yeah.
And it's very unnerving to be in that position.
That's the atheist in you, I would say.
Maybe. But like, we want to, again, like you were saying before, we want to be able to maintain control and understand who we are. Yeah.
Yep.
But then there's this other side where you lift up the veil and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second. Okay, I need to go back to where I can make sense of things. Okay, I'm in my comfortable place. So like, I have a friend who experiences anxiety, and he likes to be inside an enclosed place where he feels like, right, I know where everything is. So when you go out into the quote unquote infinite, when that is peeled back, that's scary, because all of a sudden you're like, whoa, wait a second, I don't know where I am. Like imagine. I can only imagine this is the similar kind of feeling to like when you step out of the ISS and then you're just an astronaut in space. Like if you were to look at, like if you're looking at Earth, you might be like, wow, and then you turn around and it's just space.
Yeah,
Bro, you might lose your mind there too.
it's an infinite open black box.
That's the same as looking into the dark. Like when you look, there's something that's just weird and unnerving about that.
And I think the scary thing, again, to bring it back to the atheist conversations, is when you give up your sense of control and that your mind can make things of it, ultimately, if you play it out, if you push that to its boundaries, it's the fact that you are losing your mind in the traditional sense, because you're essentially confessing. You're confessing that there is that infinite black box you will never understand and will never be able to know as long as you're a human on this planet. It's part of your reason that you're here, if you believe in God, is to experience this finite life in time and space, characterized by duality and relativity. Everything exists in relatives, right? Nothing in absolutes. And that's a very scary thing to do. I think the ultimate sacrifice, when we speak about sacrificing, and JP talks about sacrificing a lot, and the religious tradition is a lot about sacrifices, I think the ultimate sacrifice is not things. It's also not thoughts. For myself, it's the sacrifice of your mind. And the fact that your mind in itself is not what you thought it was. It's extremely limited. So I think losing your mind is the ultimate sacrifice. And when we say losing your mind, I don't mean that you just freaking sit in the corner and you just manifest and meditate all day and completely dissociate from life. That's not what I mean, because that's a sin in itself, I believe. You are here to experience this. You exist on the spiritual, the mental, and the physical plane. So it's your responsibility to dance between those two. And you can absolutely lose your mind by admitting that you just don't know and there's things beyond you, and yet use your mind in order to navigate yourself through life. You will still have to act out things. And in order for you to act out things, you use your sound mind and you act them out. It doesn't mean that you're going to worship your mind over your faith. It just means you're using it. And I think that's what we're supposed to do. It's using our mind and embed it in something grander. With your experience, when you look back at it, what did it teach you? What do you think was the purpose of that experience in you being pushed to those limits, and how does it serve you now?
It's a great question. It taught me that I was making some really, really bad decisions in my life. It taught me that I needed to change some things about myself. It taught me that I needed to be more humble, lead with more integrity. This was a time where I was a little bit lost, and I was definitely just engaging in the wrong types of things. Specifically, like drink, drugs, how I was acting, how I was being towards people. It was delusions of grandeur type of level, where I was just like, you know what, this is my thing. I can run it this way. It ironically was probably the closest I've been to atheism, although I believe in God. I was so far removed from what that stands for to me when I'm clear, sound mind now. So to look back at who I was at that particular point in my life, I can understand why all of my friends at the time, especially my close circle, were very worried about me, because they could see what I was not prepared to see. I was, in essence, the blind man at that point. You know, blacked out, faded vision, you'd be able to, when you talk to someone and they're kind of, they're looking at you, but they're kind of looking through you.
I know exactly.
Like this, when you black out drunk, like, hey, dude, it's all good. Yeah. And they're just looking at you, but they're looking straight through. And you're like, you're not even here, dude.
You can see their despair and how lost they are in their eyes.
And I believe that's where I was at. And I was so just doing whatever I wanted to do that my friends were not behind my back, but like in little circles were like, we might need to step in here. But I was so defensive with it. It was like, how you don't get to tell me how I live my life. I get to like live my, this is my choice. But you can't speak to somebody when they're like that. Same as like when you're having that kind of a conversation, it's just that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was not open to anyone else's view, and I was not receptive of it. So it was me against the world. Worst place to be in. To answer your question, what did I learn from that? I learned to change some parts of myself. I learned to be a better person. I learned to be more in alignment with who I believe I am inside, like not the shell of what I think I can be. Like I just had to come back down to earth.
Was that part the initiator to find God again for you and become religious? That part of knowing who you are within, because that's such a individual thing for everyone. Would you say that sparked again your path towards religion, Christianity, the Bible, whatnot?
Yeah, I think it came in alignment with that. I think it came in parallel with that, I should say.
Got it.
It was the paradigm shift that I needed.
And if you look back at that time and now, would you say, dispositionally speaking, you're emotionally better regulated than at that time?
1,000%.
Yeah, because I can't even imagine you being like that. It's like you're telling me about a person that's not you, because I know you so well, I am imagining this, and it was like hard for me to fathom. That actually makes a lot of sense. And to also relate that to the atheist conversation, 20 atheists versus one religious person, 20 religious people versus one atheist, and on average, the religious energy being more at peace and the atheists being more in despair and way more aggressive. Having faith is actually one of the strongest predictor for long-term mental health. So when we say we find God, or we find any framework that allows us to achieve peace, it actually confirms that finding. Because with your faith, and you're telling me now, as a result of, let's say, your awakening, you're way more baseline level at peace and more difficult to throw out of balance and way less likely to experience these crazy spikes. So that in itself is going to allow you to establish long-term mental health at a way higher likelihood than not having that.
Yeah, this feels like it's my evolution from some lower level of like boy psychology, where I'm on one side, I'm like throwing my toys out of the pram, and on the other side, I'm a weak, just like I could be pushed around to like somewhere else. I'm not suggesting I'm at some peak now, but I'm definitely in a more stable place. I lost a lot of belief in myself in this time, and I know all of that was due to my own actions. So I've had to take more responsibility to become more of who I believe I am. And in that process, it's made me more calm overall. The interesting part is that most people would probably describe me as confident, but back then I was arrogant confident, or I was not confident at all.
You were actually insecure.
I was totally insecure.
You were masquerading that insecurity with a veil.
Mask. Yeah. Now, and I would say that this is the case, confidence comes from a state of calm. It's this, I'm good with or without it. It'll be what it's going to be. Yeah. And then you carry on and you just move diligently through with what you need to do.
Yes.
And when you're in that state, you're absolutely a weapon.
Absolutely.
It bins.
Well, that also reminds me, if you don't have that faith, and if you don't don't believe in God, the fact that they're not as likely to have long-term mental health as someone with faith. Imagine you only believe in the mind and in evolution. That means you only believing in this life here. Or I should add, not dispense with any questions of the afterlife. So when life hits you, your survival instinct gets triggered immediately for both of us, for people of faith and for people of not faith, because we're existing on a physical plane. So something happens, you lose your job. Survival kicks in. Now you as a person of faith, you can say that's not for me to deal with at a higher level. God will take care of me. So that will regulate your emotional state much more efficiently and much more quickly than an atheist trying to rationalize himself out of that situation. So ultimately, the fact that you're able to accomplish long-term mental stability through faith, that in itself for me is enough evidence to make me go, you know what, I'm choosing this framework over this one.
This is absolute facts as well. This is you've totally nailed exactly how I felt. I just remembered that when you were saying that. Sorry, I'm interrupting. But
Go ahead, man.
I was trying to think myself out of the situation I was in. What I needed to do was stop this part of it and let this be the decider. Because I felt like I was in an escape room that I couldn't figure out. And the escape room was my mind. That was the labyrinth. Is that not so often the case?
Of course, man. The thing is, faith, you can't see it. You have to feel it, man. And that's what the atheists struggle with. And, you know, I messaged you this the other day after I showered. I was thinking about that.
Yeah, I love it when you message me after you've showered.
Yeah, I'll do that more often. So I was telling you, faith, when revealed, presents itself in hindsight as the path towards redemption. In the very moment, faith is blind. So for an atheist, completely unobservable. But I'm sure you've had, and you just explained it, but there's multiple difficult situations you've had in your life. You know how people, go through a breakup or they lose a job and they're devastated, and then you ask them 3 years later, they're like, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Mm-hmm. So when you go through that hardship and you have faith, at some point down the line, the reason for why that happened reveals itself. And then from that point, in hindsight, you're chaining together the bits and pieces of how it happened, because the mind is always preoccupied. The how did it happen and when is it going to happen? So only in hindsight will you be able to justify rationally through the mind how faith was the path towards redemption. You can't do that in the moment. That's the mismatch. In that moment, all you have is blind faith, intuition, feeling, God, the higher self, walking with you at all times. And then afterwards, when your life has improved and you now realize that that hardship was actually the necessary thing for you to happen, then you see, that made sense. So the ego, the justification for the ego, it follows the blind faith.
This is the exact thing I sent you as well. That's why I just picked my phone up. According to your faith, be it unto you. And Jesus uses this phrase when healing blind men, stating that their sight will be restored because of their belief in him. So we're talking about blind faith. We're talking about being able to see the unknown. Mm-hmm. I mean, or not even see the unknown, but be able to have faith that it's okay. You're going to move through it. Because I guess what happens when you're going through some form of a hardship or loss or death of a family member or, whatever it might be, you're moving into a state of uncertainty. Again, you feel like you've lost some sort of control, or you feel like the world is against you, or you feel like something's out to get you, or et cetera, et cetera. Again, you're trying to figure out, why did that happen to me? Why me again? And that can be so real. Everyone goes through that.
Can I make a case against what you said and what I said?
Yeah.
Well, the atheist would say you don't need to have faith in order for that breakup, losing of that job, to get you here 3 years after. You would have gotten there with faith or without faith. You're just using that in order to make sense of things in that very moment. That's what an atheist would say. Oh.
Right. And would you not want to have something that can hold you through that than something than not? I mean, I can call it faith. So what would the atheist call? What would atheists call that then, if not faith?
He would say, I don't need to have faith. I can just accept the situation, move on, work hard, update my resume, get a better shape, make more money, and then find a girl, find a better job, and I'll be in a better position 3 years from now. I didn't need that faith to begin with.
Yeah. Okay. So that's in the example of losing a job. What about if they've lost a family member and they feel absolutely at their wits' end, and that they're like, so sad, so depressed? How do they move through?
Just give it time. Loss is an emotion that evolved. It's normal. We lost someone from our tribe, our family member. Over time, we will regulate ourselves emotionally again, because that's the evolutionary pattern. You do not need faith, and you do not need to believe that now they're in some afterlife and they're watching over you, that you're still connected with them. And I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, I love it. I love it, because we need to be able to look at it from every single angle.
Yeah.
And fair enough, you don't need faith. What the question is, though, really is, does faith make that easier?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. And when you say easier, I would even add something more specific to it.
Asterisk.
Does faith regulate your emotional state more quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Or does faith allow you to frame your emotional state in a better way so you can find comfort even though you feel sad, that you can embrace that emotion?
That may be just different for every single person.
It may be, and we will never know, right? It's it's one of those. If the atheist finds that level of peace through making that rational chain of events of why this happened, how this is going to play out, and when he will feel good because of that, then I would say he's getting the same utility out of his framework, which is finding peace through making sense of that situation.
Are atheists basically just materialists?
Dude,
like
there's degrees. I've learned that it's very hard to black and white those people.
Because if we take the word God out of it,
Mm-hmm.
are they just people that don't believe in the things that they can't see, touch, smell, hear?
Yeah, I also believe that's and again, there's degrees, man. I've heard different views of atheists. The same way that JP said you can be 8/12 Christian or 6 or half Christian. What about God?
Nothing is black nor white.
Right.
It's not. We're not computers. We're not only ones and zeros. We are biological mechanisms. We're all of those things, experiencing ourselves in that manner. That's why we have these kind of conversations, because we're able to kind of move around through those things. We're to our knowledge, once again, to our knowledge, we're the most complex thing that we've discovered. We're also the one doing the observation of that.
Yeah.
What we need, I think, is a bit more compassion for each other and each other's viewpoints. So it's fun, like you say, it's entertaining to watch that kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, also draining, because you just want to be like, give these two guys a joint, let them sit around a campfire with some marshmallows.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll find something that they actually, because
Ultimately
what we doing, making sense of our position and our place in the universe,
yes,
but also trying to find connection.
Yes, and I think what they actually do have in common is the pursuit of truth.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is one says the pursuit of truth is nothing divine. That's what the atheists would say. There's nothing divine in that. It increases survival fitness. Whereas the religious, says the pursuit of truth in itself is divine, is religious, is God.
Yeah, and also from my experience of atheists, most of them just want to live their life without someone else telling them how to do it. Whereas Christians, and specifically from JP's perspective, the self-sacrifice thing, it's like atheists will be like, why do I have to sacrifice anything? Like, why can't I just live? But the deeper argument there is that what they're sacrificing is themselves for the greater good.
Well, even on a practical level is, well, if you want to get in shape, are you sacrificing eating unhealthy? The atheist would say yes. So ultimately, you're saying you're not making any sacrifices, but you're still sacrificing. You're always sacrificing the part of yourself that is in misalignment with who you want to become. And so you could say that in itself is a traditional, it's a religious instinct. It's a religious urge. So that's why some of it is what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
Was there first truth?
There's no answer.
Yeah, was there first truth? And we're seeking that in order to regulate ourselves emotionally? Or did truth evolve over time, the pursuit for truth?
Again, what's truth? Order? Most amount of absolute... I mean, again, Gandhi, someone I think we mentioned before about truth, he would admit that he doesn't know what that is. He's looking for it every single day. But he never found it. He found different versions of it. I think his book was called that, The Search for Truth. You're just going to be like what? Moving in a direction towards what that is. Like Jesus says that he is the way. So like you're looking for what makes most sense in so much as it's the least chaotic in terms of a direction towards what would be considered the light rather than the dark, because you don't want to be staring into that. You want to be looking this way.
And you could also say that you can test that framework or truth by the fruit it bears on an individual level, but then on a communal level, societal level, and then across time. So you could say, well, atheism is serving me. It's giving me emotional regulation. I feel good. I can make sense of things in a logical manner and I can move on. Well, then you can ask, does that benefit society? And you can make cases for and against it. And then you can say, well, does it serve society over a time that precedes you and recedes you? And from a religious standpoint, you can at least make the case that it withstood the test of time, whether you believe it or not. It was the underlying principle that allowed communities not just to survive, but also to thrive. And from that standpoint only, like from that bird's eye view, there is a utility in religion.
Yeah, well, I think this is also a kind of proving point, isn't it? If you look at nature and how nature operates, it does so without a kind of need to like hoard. It works in a symbiosis.
Yeah.
Nature doesn't need to be right.
Well, that makes me exactly think of, this is something that I was just thinking of. You know, what if everyone is just right, man? I mean, these things can all exist together. If you take out your human eye and your human perspective and the time-space perspective and your temporal self, what if all of this is about whatever you believe to be true is real? If you believe that atheism is the way to go, you're correct. If you believe religion
is the answer, I think. But
yeah, so then ultimately, it's impossible for us to make sense of it with our brain, because our brain says if this is true, then this cannot be true. So it's excluding. But from a different perspective, they can both exist together. And maybe that's just what it is. It's whatever you pick to be true, you'll be right about. Maybe that is what reality comes down to, I guess.
Yeah.
That's the infinite possibilities for you.
This is the interesting part again. No one view is going to be greater than the view of the whole, because we are all the whole. So if we're having individual experiences, but we're all part of this harmonious planet, like we're all on the planet together. So at the very least, we all agree on that. So we're one organism, one breathing organism going around the sun. Even atheists can agree with that. So they're not separate. They're not individual. So if they can understand that we're all part of the same ecosystem, then we are all one. And oneness, unity, harmony is God, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And that's why when your mind, body, and spirit are in alignment, you have that unity of the Holy Trinity, right? But if you have a disconnect at any of those three levels, you'll feel some kind of dysregulation. Something feels off.
Yeah.
Dissonance, right? So
Cognitive
there is something,
dissonance.
what you're saying, there's something very true, fundamental about the fact that there is unity and there is balance in all of that. And ultimately, man, for me, I always come down to the same conclusion. But when I have these conversations with myself or with you, at the end of the day, it's, man, how do you feel most of the time? Do you feel light? Do you feel grateful? Do you feel loving? Do you feel like I hate everyone and I'm angry at everyone and nothing, I don't find joy in anything? I think really how you feel, man, is so, so important. And that doesn't mean that you never feel sad or unhappy or whatever, but what's your dispositional state, man? Are you in agony? Are you in despair? Or are you at peace? I'd say whatever allows you to find that state, that's probably your most beneficial framework.
Totally agree. If you can feel and live from joy and enthusiasm, life reps. What do you need? You don't need for anything.
Yes.
So you can just get to the living.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think everything that we always discuss and everything we're doing on a daily is for us to regulate ourselves emotionally and find that level of peace most of the time. You know, we're still wrestling with God. I think if we were at that state, you know, approaching the higher states of consciousness, we probably wouldn't be sitting here and discussing that stuff.
I disagree with that.
Really?
Yeah.
I think
I think what we're doing here is beyond ourselves.
Yeah. But I'm also thinking that there is something inherent for us to discuss this, which almost allows us to refresh our framework all the time. It's almost a sort of prayer. Like you still go to church, right? You still pray. It's almost like it's training for our soul to a certain extent. It feels good when we do it. I think there's people in this world that transitioned that state and they just are. They can look at us, say, hey, it's fun. It's fun. I can see why they're doing it.
I think we enjoy this process, though, too.
The question is, why do we enjoy the process?
Because it's exploratory, because it confirms where we want to be and who we want to be.
If we were in a state of higher levels of enlightenment, bliss, we got glimpses of that when I was on psilocybin. I'm sure you had that with some drug. If we would live in those states, which is probably not a good thing to do for a physical being all the time, but if we were in those states, would we just go out and experience reality over, let's say, discussing atheism versus religion? That's my question.
This conversation specifically, maybe not so much, but I think generally we would be still having conversations of this degree in an effort to stay in that frequency, to be able to share it with as many people as possible. We would be having the conversation whether in front of a camera or to a person. Like, do you not find that you have these kind of conversations, or at least end up in them, or direct towards them with everybody that you're talking to at the moment? It's not just something that happens when we hit record in here.
Yeah, maybe. I think I would disagree. And I tell you why, though. I think I would disagree because what we're still doing right now is we're using our mind to have the core values of our life crystallize, make them more visible, make them more clear, and find reasons for why those values are the values that we live out. I would say at a certain level, you just, how do I put it? You enjoy being those values over discussing them to an extent where you get to a state where it's more important for you to just be that by living it out, by being with someone and just being grateful to them or showing them the love or giving that to them rather than discussing the value in itself, because you've transcended maybe the desire to discuss it. I don't know. I'm thinking
I think there's some definite truth in what you're saying.
yeah, I don't know because I'm not there, but I know from some glimpses that I had on psychedelics, and also sometimes we still get into those states, these flow states where everything is great. You just are that. You're just living all of the things.
Yeah, that's true flow. I mean, look, we're also in flow now still. I would still say that I love doing what we're doing, and in the exploration of having, for me, to be able to ask somebody who I love and trust for their opinion on something, whether I agree with it or not, and to try and remain open to changing my mind is always going to be fascinating to me. And I'll be still doing that when I'm 80 years old with you, with a espresso in some place in, like Southern Italy. Like, that's still going to be the case. I'm still going to want to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And I don't think that is infinite to me, because it's constantly, oh yeah, I never thought of it like that. Oh yeah, good point. And then it's reframing and helping me recontextualize things. It's fascinating and it doesn't get boring.
Never does. At least same thing for me, man. It's like when we talk about these things, nothing feels more right, and nothing feels like time and space evaporates more than when I'm in these conversations. Sometimes we do this for 3-4 hours because it's meditative for us. And what I mean by that is our focus is 100% engaging in the conversation, because it's so deeply spiritually stimulating that everything else just freaking, it just fades away. It's just this micro focus on the thing. And I love that too. And there might just be degrees to which you wrestle with these questions as you move up and down the state of knowing or consciousness.
Yeah, but there's no point where you get
can't.
I've figured it all out now.
No,
that's
not
never going to be a thing.
That's not the purpose of the life here.
No,
we're limited, man. Like how it's. I think that's the reason for us to engage in these conversations is because inherently I think we have this seeking nature to find truth, and for me that truth is the divine. And the conversations that we're having is allowing me to more clearly develop the values I want to live by. And that allows me to be those values. And by doing so, moving closer to the divine or to God.
It also allows you to experience those values in others. The more you identify with them, the closer you are to that, the more you experience that in everybody else.
Absolutely true.
Which is pure beauty.
Absolutely true. And you can only experience those values to the degree that you have developed them yourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you real quickly, how do you define the divine?
That's a good question, man. I would say it is what allows me to find peace when everything around me, life around me, would cause me to feel desperate, sad, and angry. So whatever it is that allows me to snap out of that, for me, is the divine. So it allows me to find peace amidst a turbulent environment. The divine is also the pursuit of truth for me, and it starts with truth within myself, being aware of why I'm thinking, doing, and saying things, dissecting that, and being brutally honest from which insecurity it comes from. And by doing so, developing a certain level of courage. I think courage cannot be built unless you assume ultimate responsibility. And I think ultimate responsibility is a result of you being honest with yourself. And from there, you will build courage, and courage will allow you to transcend fear, and it will allow you to do the things that you're called to do to a certain extent. And that in itself is love. So I think they're connected. The love, the truth, the courage, the peace. I can't say it's one or the other. It's this entire structure for me. And it's just that thing that feels right. It's like, I'm just on the right path. I think that's the signal from the divine. That's the communication with the divine. It's just everything within me is telling me keep moving that way. And that's why I think you need that unity of mind, body, and spirit.
That rips. I love that.
Rips. Yeah, thank you, man.
It's a really hard question to answer, especially on carnivore.
Especially on...
You're like, oh man, he's giving me this
on
question
any
right now, man, a brooder.
Oh man, on any podcast you pick this one.
Dude, you did really well considering.
Thank you, man. Likewise, bro.
Peace.
Peace.